Let's take it down a notch now and get into this alpha state, which is so important for you because it opens up strategic thinking, planning, learning, and deconstruction and reflection, which is exactly what you do when you meet one-on-one with a client. This is the sweet spot you've got to get people into. And so if you get into that state, you'll be able to bring people along for the beautiful ride. I'll show you a little example of how this works and the power that it can have. This is a photo that I took in 2003 after I got my PhD. No one would hire me. Apparently, once you have a doctorate, no one hires you. So I was unemployed. Wish I knew that on the way into 13 years of grad school. But anyway, so I grabbed my bike and a tent and rode my bike from Cairo to Cape Town, 11,000 kilometers through Africa. That got into the Guinness Book of World Records as the fastest human-powered crossing of Africa. I didn't get into the Guinness Book of World Records because I hit a cow in Malawi and had to take a few days off. That's another story for another presentation. But on that trip, two people met. They ended up getting married. After the wedding, we went to Shishui National Game Park in South Africa, which is the image that you're seeing there. And we went out on safari, which is epically cool and one of the most amazing things I've ever done in my life. And I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie, in case you haven't noticed that yet. And so there was a few options when I got to the lodge. The options were morning game drive, fabulous. Nighttime game drive, more interesting. But then scribbled in chalk on the bottom corner was walking safari. And I was like, oh, you can be part of the food chain. Let's go for a walk. This is gonna be awesome. So I went out with my guide, and he had the smallest gun I've ever seen in my life. I don't even know what that thing was for. And we went out for a walk in the South African game park, and we were looking for animals. Didn't really find anything, but we were finding amazing plants and birds and learning so much. He was so knowledgeable and absolutely spectacular. But at one point I was like, can we like really look for some bigger animals and see what we can find? He's like, all right, well, they all go to the watering hole. So we went to the watering hole, which is where the animals converge to drink water and eat each other. So that was intense, walking through that as part of the food chain. And then we walked around this watering hole and up to this little mound of earth right here. And I stood up on that mound of earth and I looked to my left and I saw this. And everyone froze. The rhino's ears locked in on me because they hear better than they speak. I froze, my guide froze. It's just a standoff. I eventually lifted my camera, took a photo. It went click, really loud, echoed everywhere. My guide swore in Swahili. I understand Swahili, so he said something disparaging about Caucasian tourists, which I won't repeat here. And then I eventually sort of moved myself back out carefully and away from the situation. And when I got back to my tent at night, I was flipping through my photos on my camera and I saw this one. I was like, that was amazing. What an unbelievable experience. So glad I got that photo. And I cannot believe I missed the second rhino. Do you see it? Bottom right? See its back? I also completely missed these two beautiful green parrots. So here's what happened. As a physiologist, I deconstruct these things. I was like, oh, okay, so when I was in that situation, and my attention was focused exclusively on the rhino and the horn, the threat, the danger, legitimately, it's a rhino, it could kill me in 5 seconds. The problem is that when you're faced with a threat, something that scares you, whether it's a rhinoceros horn, or a COVID-19 headline, or economic outlook reports, or inflation reports, or the murder hornets. Remember that? That was an actual thing. It's been so bad for 4 years that you're like, oh yeah, the murder hornets, that was the thing. Anyway, so when we're faced with these like serious threats, your eyeball changes shape so you can focus better on whatever it is that's threatening you. The problem is that you lose your peripheral vision. Your world turns into that. And you can't see anything in your peripheral vision, and you also then lose your peripheral thinking. So just think about the world right now. Threat after threat after threat after threat. And as a result, we've lost our ability to even contemplate the fact that there could be a second rhino. By analogy, other challenges, Black Lives Matter, residential schools, all of the other major societal issues that we need to address right now to make this a just, safe society for everybody, where every single person can reach their true human potential with no structural limitations to that. And then that also stops us from being able to see what are the opportunities, by analogy, the two parrots. So moving forwards, as leaders, as people who help others navigate life to be safe, to put their families in a better place, it is incumbent upon all of us, every chance that we get, to get out of beta mode, stress, anxiety, fear, and help people get down into alpha so that we can increase our ability to think peripherally such that we can navigate a way and a path forwards. We need to get people into an alpha brainwave state so we can show them where to go, how to get better, where their families can be. The way to do that is to leverage the power of metacognition. When we're in an alpha brainwave state, when we're strategizing, reflecting, deconstructing, the frontal lobe of the brain activates, which is right behind your forehead, which you've probably all felt. Think about it. Imagine somebody thinking deeply about a subject. What do they often do? They rub their forehead, right? I saw a couple people do it, right? Because you can actually feel this happening. When you're thinking deeply about something like, oh man, that's metacognition. That's an alpha brainwave state. You're feeling it in action. I would love for you to be able to do this on demand. We have our 3-method pathway here: body, mind, and environment. And in this case, the body position that I need you to be in, unlike beta mode where I need you to be activated to get into an alpha state, I want you to be calm, cool, and collected. That's my son Adam demonstrating strategic thinking on the beach near my house. He's like, how do I hit stuff with stuff, right? That's his strategic thinking. Yours might be, what life insurance plan is best for this client, right? So it's all the same stuff, just at obviously much, much different levels. When it comes to being in an alpha state, stillness is a superpower. I'd love for you to carve out some time during your week to make sure that you have an hour or two at some point, daily, weekly, monthly, where you can just sit quietly in a place that you love. It might be a room in your house, might be your office, could be your car, might be a park bench, where you can just sit and think. Being busier is not the path forwards in an era where beta brainwave mode is the default. Navigating forwards in an uncertain time is how we're going to help ourselves, help other people better. And to get in a place where you can be still, to think, is a game changer, again, in an era of constant busyness. The second idea that I have for you is I want your mind to be reflective. Let me tell you a story. This is me in 2012, 10 years ago, in the cardiac ward at Toronto General Hospital. Yes, I am your health expert, and I was in the cardiac ward. Anyway, radical transparency here, I'm not hiding it. Summer 2012 was interesting. We were moving houses. Think about life insurance. Moving houses. I was getting ready to go commentate the Olympics for CTV in London. I was publishing my first book, Super Bodies. Judith, my wife, was finishing grad school. My daughter Ingrid was 2, and I hadn't slept in 2 years as a result, obviously. For anyone who's had kids, you know the first little while you don't sleep. So I was exhausted, burned out, not eating very well, not exercising enough, and pretty stressed. My daughter Ingrid went to daycare. She picked up a virus, a cold. She got the cold. I got the cold. And instead of just getting better like Ingrid did, I ended up with viral myocarditis. So a swollen, infected, inflamed heart. So I had to go check myself into Toronto General, where ironically enough I worked at the time. Checking yourself into your own hospital, by the way, not necessarily a great career move, but you do get to bypass the emergency room lineup. So anyway, I landed in the cardiac ward, and I was in there for 4 days, and the gentleman next to me was dying. So that was like, put everything in context for me. And so I was lying there in bed for 4 days thinking about my life. I came to a fundamental realization, And the realization that I arrived at, which hopefully by sharing this story, I save you the hassle of going through, was that my priorities were work, family, health. And what they needed to be was the opposite: health, family, work. Thank you. Health, even above family. Because if you're not there, and that was the reality for me at that time. So I opened up my computer, logged onto the internet. By the way, the fact that I had my computer with me in the cardiac ward was without question why I was in the cardiac ward. That is not lost on me now. And I registered for Ironman. So, because I wanted to be able to change the trajectory of my life. And the pathway forwards, I realized, was to ask myself 3 specific questions. What do I want? To get back to being an athlete again. To get out of here and never, ever, ever come back again as a patient. Second question I asked was why? Because I've got a young family. And I need to be there for Ingrid. That's Ingrid. She's wearing 2 different socks. Totally my fault, not Judas. And how? Register for Ironman. And this is the transition that happened when 12 months later, I was able, don't clap an 80. Thank you, you're very kind. The reason why I say don't clap is because literally an 80-year-old lady blew by me at the finish line. Like, this was not the greatest athletic accomplishment of my life. And I finished in the middle of the night, but anyway, she was incredible. And in Ironman, you write your age on your leg. And so she blew by me and I was like, 80, wow. Anyway, but what I wanted to share with you here is that this is the difference. Greg on the left, his priorities were work, family, health. Greg on the right, health, family, work. The only way I was able to come to that realization was by pausing, thinking reflectively, getting into an alpha state such that I can strategize a path forwards and not repeat the mistakes of the past. You see, when we ask ourselves reflective questions, it enables us to navigate forwards. This is what you do with your clients, but I would encourage you to do this for yourselves as well, to make sure that you're moving, you and your families, your loved ones, in the direction that you want to go. And you cannot do that when you're in beta, hustle, focus, execute, stress, get stuff done mode. You must be in that alpha state to be able to see the right path forwards. The final piece of this puzzle, when it comes to getting into an alpha state, is to leverage the power of nature. We have beautiful locations in Canada. We're so very fortunate here in Calgary to have the mountains very close by. When we get out into the trees, when we get out into the natural environment, the parks, our visual field is full of what are known as fractal patterns, and they impact our mental health. This is my daughter, Ingrid, early on in the pandemic, out of school, away from her friends, activities canceled, and she was not, my hands shake as I even tell the story, like she was not in a good place. And we were sitting around the table and she told me what she thought of this situation. F-bomb, F-bomb, F-bomb. It's like, wow, that's spicy for 10. Obviously you've been talking to your mother again. And I managed to get her outside. And once I got her outside and we walked a little bit, and this is what she looked like. I kept going, kept moving, didn't say a word. And honestly, no more than 10 minutes later, that's Ingrid. Completely different psychology, purely as a result of getting out into nature and filling her visual field with fractal patterns, which are repetitive patterns that decrease or increase in size. If we look around this room, you will notice that everything is right angles, which is our built environment. Built environments help us to get into a beta brainwave mode. Fractal patterns in nature help us get into alpha states. These fractal patterns that exist in 92% of plant life on Earth are also present in trees, river systems, and your lungs. the airways of your lungs have the exact same fractal pattern that most plant life does. These fractal patterns not only are present in the airways of your lungs, they're also present in the capillary beds and blood vessels of your heart and the neurons inside your brain. There's no mathematical difference between the key organs in your body and our beautiful natural environment. And when we get into nature, we reconnect, and that pulls us out of alpha stress zones down into an alpha state where we can rest, recover, and regenerate. It is so powerful that it increases the activity of your natural T killer cells. This is amazing research that has been published that shows that you increase your immune system when you're in nature, so much so that it enables you to fight off colds, flus, COVID-19, and even cancer if we are in nature as little as once per week. So I would love for all of you to consider your weekly forest bathing as a protocol for you. Get into a park, go for a walk outside. Someone last week was like, do I have to take off my clothes? No, you don't have to take off your clothes. Stay dressed, don't get arrested, right? Just go for a walk in the park, and that will up-level all of this. This is a massive recharge for all of you. And in Canada, the weather in the winter is sometimes not pleasant, and obviously it's cold and rainy here today. But the only thing to think about is that there's no bad weather. There's just bad clothing. So don't be afraid to invest in the boots, get the jackets, get you, your family, your loved ones outside, leverage this power because it makes a massive difference.